What if I told you the reason you get nervous around women has nothing to do with women? And once you understand this today, as I explain it step by step, you'll never feel that like tightness or, overly nervous feeling in your chest ever again. Let me explain. So in my past, I grew up in a super small town up in Utah. And if you know Utah, you know what that usually means. That's right. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the LDS people, or Mormons, Mormonism. And it's not just a belief set. It's that culture. It's their community. It's the identity of most of the state. And I really wasn't a part of it, not in my immediate family whatsoever. I still got baptized at 8 years old, but I didn't go to church on Sundays. And I was still always a very good kid. Honestly, probably on a super boring level for most people and most kids. I was never in any serious trouble. I was always respectful. I played sports. I was always outside, like skateboarding, playing basketball. And I did really well in school, but I wasn't in church on Sundays. And that was enough. There were mothers in the neighborhood where I lived, of course, who didn't like that I was friends with their sons. And it's not because I was like a dangerous or bad kid, but it was because I wasn't at their ward in the church, next to them on Sundays, right? So they were consistently gossiping about me, from what I caught wind of it from my mom, hearing from other neighbors, and then even, slightly from my friends. They were really trying to like diffuse my friendship with my friends by painting me as a bad person. And slowly, without anyone saying it, I learned something pretty dangerous, honestly, as a kid. I don't belong. And when a kid internalizes that, he doesn't speak up anymore. He doesn't raise his hand anymore. He doesn't risk embarrassment with anything. Some days in high school, I would go the entire day without saying a single word. Just my headphones in, listen to my music, walking around. And it wasn't because I didn't have anything to say, but because I knew it wouldn't make a difference to their judgments. So I became visually rebellious to differentiate myself from the, Walmart white guy look. And I didn't act out, with actions towards those people who judged me, but I visually separated myself from everyone on purpose. Kind of like the Eminem song. And I am whatever you say I am. Honestly, as silly as that sounds, that's the logical, don't give a fuck style attitude that I had towards those Mormons who judged me. And my rebellious teenage style wasn't scary to, the regular kids or anything. The heavy metal band shirts, long swept emo skater kid hair, ripped skinny jeans, and, black is the dominant color, right? It was mainly adults that this had a separation effect on. So the Mormon kids, they didn't even care at all. And some even thought it was cool. Like there were some post-hardcore emo Mormons back in the day even. Like quite a few of them, honestly, like a dozen at least in my high school. And here's where it all gets super interesting. So fast forward to November 2014. This was the first time I ever stepped on stage as a vocalist for a band, my first metal band, which we called Below Fiction. And we took the stage downtown Salt Lake City, loud amps, dark room, lights on all of us, all five of us, and people staring, right? There were lots of unfamiliar faces, and the turnout in the crowd was a lot bigger than I expected for us to be playing our first freaking show. And I felt it, right? That tightness in my kind of upper chest, and my heart rate went up. My adrenaline was pumping, right? The same feeling you get when you're about to walk up to a girl, and me as well. But something different happened this time. We practiced so much as a band, right? Every transition, every scream, every breakdown. And when that first note hit, when we took the stage, it was like a part of my brain just shut off. And I entered flow, like from the beginning to the end. Even between songs, right? I spoke to the crowd with a super clear mind. No hesitation or wondering what I should say or what's the right thing to say, right? There was no overthinking. There was no self-monitoring, right? It was just presence, and the show went amazing. And here's the question I want to ask you. Why could the shy kid who barely spoke, all throughout high school become the front man of a high volume, high impact heavy metal band? What changed? Because it wasn't my true personality. I was just hiding my personality from everyone, right? What it was my identity, especially to myself. So, what does this story have to do with stopping being nervous in front of women, right? Well, let me explain. You don't actually get nervous around women. You're getting nervous around judgment. And I learned that pretty early, like second grade. very specifically, very vividly. So there were a couple girls, and they would just always go out of their way to pester me. Think like Helga from Hey Arnold, like constant teasing, annoying me for no reason. And it kind of stung. Like as a kid, like they're ganging up on you and you don't know why. So I told my mom about it, right? And she reframed it instantly. She said, they probably have a little crush on you. It's probably harmless. And that was the first time, I learned something powerful too. And honestly, it took me a while to process this because I didn't truly understand what she meant until later. Like when I did watch Hey Arnold and saw this dynamic of Helga, like pretending to hate him, but secretly loving him, right? So look, man, sometimes rejection isn't rejection. It's just misinterpreted energy. But if you don't reframe it, then you'll internalize it. So I had to reframe that, and thankfully I did. And when you're in high school and you feel like you already don't belong, you'll start building, a nervous system that expects disapproval, and it can become even worse, right? So when you see a beautiful woman, your brain doesn't think she's interesting. It thinks, don't get judged, maybe don't interact altogether. Think about it. If, your brain is just wired incorrectly to think that, right? Now, let me break something else down. Being overly nervous isn't a curse either. And despite what some people think, nervousness isn't even a weakness. So think about this very distinctly. Nervousness is just unchanneled energy. That tight feeling in your chest before going up on stage or something. That's the same psychological response before approaching a woman, right? The difference is its meaning. Because now, when I'm on stage and I have that, excitement right before we start our set and even ongoing through it, I'm excited. And, most men label that same feeling as a threat. It's the same nervous system response, but it's labeled differently. So, it's actually causing you to be more alert and more focused with heightened senses, like, just keeping you ready for anything. But in reality, it's all how we label it. It's a different interpretation altogether, but it's this, two sides of the same coin. All it is just a different interpretation of the same thing. And your interpretation controls your behavior, right? So I'm not going to leave you fully hanging with this video. I'm going to fully explore this. So here's the first mindset shift. With this crowd like stage analogy, you might be thinking that you have to change up your entire like set list just to impress this girl, right? In the audience, because you think she's the audience, so to speak, right? Well, she's not the audience, plain and simple. And even if she is maybe like the only one in the audience, that doesn't mean that she wants you to change your entire set list for her, right? When I go on stage, I don't perform to impress one person in the crowd. I perform because that's what I'm there to do, right? And that is who I am also. Those songs are selected for a reason. The words I wrote in the songs are mine. And ironically, that's what actually makes people respond. It's that genuineness, right? Because so many people treat like speaking to a woman like they're auditioning, like she has a clipboard, she's rating them, scoring them. But imagine if like a front man was walking on the stage for thousands of people and he's thought, well, I hope they approve of me. Dead energy, right? Women feel that instantly. And confidence isn't loudness either. It's self-approval, really, when it comes down to it. Now, let me take a break. Let me take a second at my notes. So I want to make sure I cover this right. There's this huge second shift to kill nervousness for good. And as true as this is, it only works, of course, when you do it, right? So this is as plain as just rewiring your brain from exposure therapy. And you may have heard of exposure therapy. So constant exposure to that fearful stimuli in a controlled or normal settings will help, desensitize your triggers. So let me tell you, me and my band back then, we practiced relentlessly before our first show, right? Our repetition was like fully built up. We knew all the songs perfectly because we wrote them, we recorded them, and we played them together for nearly a year before we even played them live. So we had a lot of reps under our belt, right? So if you only talk to women when, the one comes along that's super hot, you're treating every interaction with that type of person like it's your first show, right? There's no rehearsal, there's no reps. It's just pressure. And
of course that's why you're nervous.
Because you just haven't built like that stage time, right? So it's a wonder that you even have the courage to approach with such little practice, because for me, it'd be the opposite. So what do you need to do? Well, talk to the barista, the receptionist. For me, I talked with the person at the rec center at my old gym, making eye contact with the cashier. Anything, all of these little wins, right? Ask a stranger for directions, give a random person a genuine compliment. Your brain needs proof that you can survive social interaction. And that confidence is built through competence. So become competent by putting those like social reps in, right? Your brain will realize it's not a matter of life and death, and you can, turn down the dials a little bit on the excitement, so to speak. So there's another piece. And when I moved out, as I was working, full time and going through night classes in college, I was changing a lot. I ended up discovering, I had a lot of freedom in my own space, ownership of my life. I stopped seeing myself as the shy kid, right? And I was able to just expand a lot more. And fitness played a role, of course, in that too. I built all that muscle, improved my posture, increased my energy, lost a lot of stubborn fat. And my love for psychology was fused with my love for biology that I learned. So I learned, the full implementation, tips for the best of both worlds. And I understood how deep physiology actually affects your psychology too. So when you look better, when you move better, when you sleep better, your baseline confidence in life rises, right? Your testosterone rises. Probably more than you think if if your body's not necessarily something you're super proud of right now, right? But there's one point I want to give you some more value on when it comes to overcoming shyness. So in my past, I once dated a super shy girl, more shy than me. And it was difficult, not because she wasn't a kind girl or anything, but because extreme shyness blocks any attempt at a connection, right? The conversations felt, really heavy, right? The dates were just boring, and it made me realize that this is how I made others feel when I was so shy, right? And when you're too in your head and you don't want to share anything, you're not present. And that presence is what is actually attractive. It's the vulnerability that comes through, right? Who you express yourself as isn't like a curated act even. And you realize that it's not even about perfection. It's about being present and just expressing yourself in that moment, right? I think most people know this. But let's talk practical here. So for me personally, I always felt my brain had difficulty choosing just the right words early on to start a connection with someone, right? So even, in some practice, just talking to random people, I couldn't come up with the right words. So listen up. If your brain struggles to select the right words, that's just overthinking. And overthinking, of course, is self-monitoring. And self-monitoring is actually more fear of judgment. So here's the rule. Stop trying to always say the perfect thing and just start saying the honest thing. Instead of what's the best opener or pickup line, try something that's just more observant and like in the there and now. Something like, hey, I noticed your style. That's a cool look. It's simple, it's direct, it shows you're present, and it has that modifier at the end that makes them realize that you like their style, right? So always do your best to be open, just communicating with your feelings and genuine opinion when possible, using, of course, your own words. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated. When I'm on stage, I'm not calculating every single syllable, right? Or, even better, if I'm speaking in between songs, I'm just addressing everything that's going on there in that room, basically, and playing off the crowd, right? So, the main point here is presence and being observant, right? Being observant of the present and bringing those out in your own words. That's what it's all about. So go out there, get some reps in, put these tips into action, and, really just put yourself out there if you feel overly nervous. Talk to a random person, or even if it's not a random person, right? So here's the long-term goal. You don't want to be a man who, even isn't nervous. You don't want to desensitize to that point. I don't think you will. But you want to act despite your nerves, because courage isn't the absence of fear. It's movement in the face of fear. And the first show, I had a lot of nerves. Every big show to this day, I'd still get nervous. But now I recognize it as fuel to help me dial in. So imagine if every time, instead of getting nervous, you got excitement, when it comes to speaking with that woman. And when you looked at that woman, you thought, showtime, right? That's when everything changes, when you can change your mind around that. So, it's not about being nervous around women. It's the fact that you were conditioned. You were, maybe rejected. Maybe it was religion that made you feel this type of way, or social hierarchies, maybe childhood stuff, childhood traumas, whatever it is. But this conditioning can be reversed. How? Through identity shift, right? stop saying words and judgments about yourself like I'm shy, and start saying I'm building social reps, or I'm trying to become more social, right? Stop saying she's out of my league and just start saying she's a human. Stop saying things like I hope she likes me, and start saying something like I'm seeing if we vibe, right? And that's a good intent to have, because that shift just from its outset removes pressure, right? And I can only speak from my experience because, of course, I went from that kid who was, going all through high school, barely speaking, and thought he didn't belong, internalizing judgment. That little kid shrank. But the moment that he stepped onto a stage and owned space with people who supported him, that kid realized something. Belonging is not given, it's embodied. And no one gave me permission, to be a front man, really. I took the mic and screamed everything I always wanted to say about life, and people formed around me because of it. And, women are no different. They don't decide your worth. They reveal whether you're aligned with yourself, with your purpose. And if that overly shy kid can scream lyrics, from his soul to a crowd, then you can start up a conversation with one person a day just for a little bit. Your nervousness isn't weakness. It's simply unused energy. So channel it, reframe it, build those reps, and upgrade your identity by realizing who you actually are. And the next time you feel nervousness trigger when you see a beautiful woman, don't shrink, just smile and think, showtime. That's it. Thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, put it in the comments. Remember, like, comment, share, hit the bell button. And once again, any questions, any topics you guys want me to cover, let me know. And we'll talk soon. That's it. Peace out, y'all.